You can't see your own feet. You can't see the hand you're holding up in front of your face. You step off the curb and you don't know if you're walking into the street or falling into an abyss. This isn't some horror movie. This isn't some post-apocalyptic nightmare. This is London, December 1952, and I was there. My name is Margaret Henderson, and I'm 94 years old now. But back then, I was a 20-year-old secretary working in the City of London, living in a small flat in Bethnal Green with my younger sister Dorothy. And for 5 days in December 1952, I lived through something that would kill 12,000 people and change London forever. Most of you watching this have probably never heard of the Great Smog. It's not taught in schools the way the Blitz is. There are no monuments to it, no memorial services. But it was one of the deadliest environmental disasters in recorded history, happening right in the heart of one of the world's greatest cities. And it happened so quietly that people were dying before anyone realized something was wrong. Let me take you back to that December. Let me show you what it was like when the air itself became poison. London in 1952 was a city still healing from war. 7 years had passed since VE Day, but the scars were everywhere. Bomb sites dotted the landscape like missing teeth in a smile. Entire streets had been reduced to rubble and never rebuilt. We still had rationing, though it was finally starting to ease up. Sweets had just come off ration that year, and I remember how excited everyone was about that. The city was cold that winter. Bitterly cold. Britain was going through what they called an austerity period. Coal was expensive, so the government had restricted households to buying only lower-grade coal. The good stuff, the clean-burning anthracite, was being exported to earn foreign currency. We needed the money, they said. The country needed to recover. So we burned the cheap stuff, the dirty stuff. Coal so full of sulfur and impurities that it spat and hissed in your fireplace like an angry cat. Everyone burned coal in 1952. Every home, every factory, every power station. London had millions of coal fires burning every single day. The city's entire economy ran on coal. The trains ran on coal. The power stations ran on coal. Your morning cup of tea was boiled with coal. And all that coal produced smoke. Even on a normal day, London was smoky. We were used to it. The famous London fog, right? Romantic and mysterious in all the old stories and films. Sherlock Holmes weather, we'd joke, except it wasn't really fog. It was smoke. Industrial pollution mixed with natural fog, creating what we called a pea-souper. Thick, yellow-green, and smelling of sulfur. You'd come home from work and have to wash the black grime off your face and neck. Your white collar would be gray by lunchtime. But that was just London. That was normal. We had no idea what was coming. December 5th, 1952. Friday. I remember the morning was cold and still. Completely still. Not a breath of wind. I left my flat around 7:30 to catch the bus to work. The air outside was crisp and sharp in my lungs, the kind of cold that makes your nose hairs freeze when you breathe in. The sky was gray, but that was nothing unusual for London in December. By the time I got to my office in Cheapside, I noticed the fog had started to thicken. Still, nothing alarming, just another pea-souper, I thought. We'd had them before. I worked as a secretary for a shipping insurance company, typing, filing, answering phones. The office was on the 3rd floor of a Victorian building with high ceilings and drafty windows. My desk was near one of those windows, and I'd often look out at St. Paul's Cathedral dome rising above the neighboring buildings. That morning, I could see St. Paul's just fine. By lunchtime, I couldn't see the building across the street. The fog had rolled in thick and fast, like someone had drawn a curtain across the city. When I went down to get my sandwich from the cafe around the corner, I had to feel my way along the wall. The fog was so dense it seemed to have texture, like walking through cold, wet cotton wool. "Bit thick today," the woman at the cafe said, wrapping my cheese sandwich in brown paper. Bit thick was the British understatement of the century. I ate my lunch at my desk because going back out into that fog seemed unappealing. Through the window, I could see nothing, just a yellowish-gray wall of murk. The street lamps had come on early, but you could only see them as faint halos of light, like distant planets in a polluted sky. My boss, Mr. Whitmore, came out of his office around 2 o'clock. "Miss Henderson," he said, "I think we'd better let people go home early today. This fog is getting worse, and I don't want anyone getting lost trying to get home after dark." Getting lost? In your own city? It sounds absurd, doesn't it? But that's exactly what was happening. The journey home that afternoon was like nothing I'd experienced before. The buses were running, but slowly, with conductors walking in front of them with torches to guide the drivers. I waited at my usual stop for 20 minutes before one finally loomed out of the fog like a red ghost ship. "Bethnal Green?" I asked the conductor. "Trying for it, love," he said. "Can't promise we'll get there." The bus crawled through the streets at walking pace, sometimes slower than walking pace. The conductor would hop off, check the curb to make sure we weren't veering into the wrong lane, then hop back on and give the driver the all clear to move another few yards. Normally, my journey home took 30 minutes. That day, it took nearly 3 hours. Inside the bus, people were coughing. That thick, wet cough that seems to come from deep in the chest. The fog had seeped inside the bus somehow, creating a thin haze even in the enclosed space. My eyes were watering and stinging. My throat felt raw. "Bloody awful, this," the woman next to me muttered, pressing a handkerchief to her mouth. When we finally reached a stop the conductor thought might be Bethnal Green, I got off. I wasn't entirely sure where I was. The fog was so thick I couldn't see any landmarks. I had to navigate by memory and feel, counting shop fronts, feeling for the familiar crack in the pavement near the greengrocer's, listening for the sound of the railway bridge that told me I was close to home. When I finally found my building and climbed the stairs to my flat, Dorothy was already there. She'd been sent home from the telephone exchange where she worked at noon. "Maggie," she said when I stumbled through the door. "I was getting worried. You're freezing." I was. My hands were numb, and my face felt like I'd been slapped repeatedly by cold, wet towels. My lungs hurt when I breathed. "It's like nothing I've ever seen," I said, peeling off my coat and scarf. Both were damp and smelled of sulfur. We went to the window and looked out. Our flat was on the second floor, and normally we could see across the street to the row of shops opposite. Not that day. We couldn't even see the street lamp directly below our window. Just that sickly yellow-gray murk pressing against the glass like something alive. "Do you think it'll clear overnight?" Dorothy asked. "Must do," I said. "It's just a fog." But something in my gut told me this wasn't just a fog. That night we kept all the windows sealed tight and stuffed rags along the bottom of the door. It didn't help. The fog seeped in anyway, through cracks we didn't know existed. You could see it curling under the door like smoke, spreading across the floor in thin tendrils. Within an hour, there was a visible haze inside our flat. We both started coughing. "Maybe we should put a wet cloth over our faces," Dorothy suggested. She was only 17, still had that teenage optimism that everything would be fine if we just figured out the right trick. We tried it, soaked handkerchiefs in water and held them over our noses and mouths. It helped a little bit, but not much. The fog had a smell that seemed to seep into everything. Sulfur, coal smoke, and something else. Something chemical and wrong. That night, I barely slept. The coughing kept waking me up. My own, Dorothy's, and the sounds from other flats in our building. All night long, people coughing and coughing and coughing. In the morning, the fog was worse. Saturday, December 6th. When I pulled back the curtains that morning, I genuinely couldn't tell if it was day or night. The fog was so thick, so dark, that it blocked out the sun completely. It was like living inside a dirty fish tank. Dorothy and I had planned to go shopping that day, but one look outside told us that wasn't happening. We were trapped. The world beyond our door had ceased to exist. "We should be fine," I said, taking stock of our kitchen. "We've got bread, a bit of cheese, some eggs, tea and milk. We can manage until this clears." But it didn't clear. All day Saturday, it got worse. The fog grew thicker, darker, more oppressive. You could feel the weight of it pressing down on the city. Inside our flat, the haze grew denser despite our best efforts. We could barely see from one end of our small living room to the other. And the coughing got worse. My throat was raw, and every breath hurt. Dorothy was the same. We'd given up trying to do anything productive and just sat huddled by our coal fire, handkerchiefs pressed to our faces, trying to breathe. "Maybe we shouldn't have the fire going," Dorothy said. "It's just adding more smoke." But without the fire, we'd freeze. It was December, remember? And our flat had no other heating. We were trapped between two poisons: freeze to death or choke to death. We kept the fire burning. That afternoon, we heard the ambulance sirens. At first, just one, then another, then more. A constant wail of sirens somewhere out in the fog, muffled and distant but never ending. Emergency vehicles trying to navigate through streets where they couldn't see 2 feet ahead. Our neighbor from downstairs, Mrs. Abernathy, knocked on our door around tea time. "Have you girls got any milk to spare?" she asked. She looked terrible. Her eyes were red and streaming, and she was coughing between every few words. "Only I've got my little Michael, and he's not well. Can't keep anything down. I wanted to make him some warm milk, but I've run out." We gave her our milk. We had no children to worry about. "Thank you, dears," she said. "This fog. Have you ever seen anything like it?" We hadn't. None of us had. "My father-in-law, he said back in the 20s they had some bad fogs," Mrs. Abernathy continued, leaning against our doorframe as another coughing fit took her. "But nothing like this. Nothing like this." After she left, Dorothy looked at me with frightened eyes. "People are dying out there, aren't they?" she said. I wanted to tell her no. I wanted to tell her it was just a fog, that people don't die from fog, that this was London, and we'd been through the Blitz and survived, and a bit of bad weather wasn't going to hurt us. But I couldn't, because I could hear it, all around us, in the building, in the street, in the city beyond. The sound of people coughing, struggling to breathe, the sound of ambulance sirens, the sound of a city choking to death. Sunday was worse. I know I keep saying that, but it's true. Every day the fog got worse. Every day the air got thicker, more poisonous, harder to breathe. Sunday morning I woke up coughing so hard I vomited, just bile and acid, burning my already raw throat. Dorothy was in the same state. We were both running low-grade fevers, both struggling to take deep breaths without triggering coughing fits. We needed food. We were out of bread, almost out of milk, and our last eggs had gone to Mrs. Abernathy the night before. "I'll go," I said. "I'm older. I should go." "Don't be stupid," Dorothy said. "We'll go together. We're not splitting up in this." So we bundled up in our warmest coats, wrapped scarves around our faces like bandits, and ventured out into the fog. I cannot adequately describe what it was like. Imagine the thickest fog you've ever seen, then multiply it by 100. Imagine you can't see your own feet when you look down. Imagine you can't see your sister's hand when she's holding yours. Imagine air so thick it seems solid, so toxic that every breath feels like inhaling glass. That was the Great Smog. We felt our way along the building fronts, counting doors, trying to remember the route to the corner shop. People moved past us in the fog like ghosts, gray shapes coughing and stumbling. I heard someone fall, heard them cry out, but I couldn't see where they were to help them. The corner shop, which was normally a 5-minute walk, took us nearly 40 minutes to find. When we finally stumbled through the door, the shopkeeper, Mr. Patel, looked like death himself. His face was gray, his lips almost blue. He was wheezing with every breath. "Girls," he managed to say, "you shouldn't be out." "We need food," I said. "Bread, milk, anything." He sold us what he had left: bread that was a day old, a pint of milk, a tin of beans. His hands shook as he wrapped them. "My wife," he said, "took her to hospital last night. Can't breathe. They said, hundreds of people. Same thing." The journey home was even worse than the journey there. The fog seemed to be actively fighting us now, pressing down, pushing into our lungs. Dorothy started crying halfway back, panicking that we were lost, that we'd never find our building again. "We're okay," I kept saying, though I wasn't sure myself. "We're okay. Just keep moving. Keep counting. We're okay." When we finally found our door, we nearly sobbed with relief. Monday, December 8th. 4 days into the fog, and the city had effectively stopped functioning. No buses were running anymore. No trains. Even the London Underground had shut down parts of the system because the fog had penetrated underground, filling the tunnels with toxic air. Ambulances could barely move. Police were overwhelmed with people reporting missing family members, lost in the fog somewhere between work and home. And people were dying. We didn't know the numbers then. We didn't know that hospitals were overflowing, that funeral homes were running out of space, that morgues were stacking bodies in hallways. We just knew that the ambulance sirens had been constant for 3 days, and that people in our building kept getting sick. Mrs. Abernathy's little boy, Michael, had been taken to hospital Sunday night. She came to our door Monday morning, her face streaked with tears. "He's so small," she said. "So small, and he can't breathe right. They've got him in an oxygen tent, but there's so many people, so many children." She broke down then, and we held her while she cried. That afternoon, old Mr. Chen from the top floor died. Just died. His daughter found him in his chair, dead for hours, no one having heard him call for help through the thick walls and the constant noise of coughing throughout the building. Dorothy and I sat in our flat, barely speaking, trying not to use too much energy, trying not to breathe too deeply. We rationed our food. We rationed our movements. We existed in a kind of suspended animation, waiting for the fog to lift, praying it would lift, not knowing if it ever would. The BBC radio kept broadcasting, telling people to stay indoors, to avoid unnecessary travel, to seek medical help if they had difficulty breathing. But what were we supposed to do? We were already indoors. We already couldn't breathe. The hospitals were full. We were on our own. That night, I thought I was going to die. I woke up around 2 in the morning, coughing so violently I couldn't catch my breath. I was suffocating, drowning in air. My chest felt like someone had their hands around my lungs, squeezing, squeezing, never letting go. Dorothy heard me and came running. "Maggie, Maggie, breathe. Just breathe." But I couldn't. Every time I tried to inhale, I just coughed more. Wet, horrible coughs that brought up dark phlegm. My vision was starting to go dark around the edges. Dorothy did the only thing she could think of. She dragged me to the bathroom, turned on the hot water tap, and let the tiny room fill with steam. "Breathe the steam," she said, her voice high with panic. "Just try to breathe the steam. It's clean. It's clean." I don't know if it was the steam or just the panic passing, but slowly, agonizingly, I managed to draw in a breath, then another. The coughing eased just enough for me to get air into my lungs. We sat on the bathroom floor together until dawn, breathing steam, holding each other, terrified. "If you die, I die," Dorothy said at one point. "I'm not doing this without you." "We're not dying," I told her, though I wasn't sure I believed it. Tuesday, December 9th, day 5 of the fog, and something changed. I woke up and realized I could see across our bedroom. Not clearly, but I could see. The fog inside our flat was thinner. Not gone, but definitely thinner. I stumbled to the window and pressed my face against the glass. Outside, I could see the street lamp. Faintly, like looking through gauze, but I could see it. "Dorothy!" I called. "Dorothy, come look!" She came running, and we both stood at the window like prisoners seeing sunlight for the first time. The fog was lifting. Slowly, grudgingly, but it was lifting. Throughout that day, we watched the world come back. First, we could see across the street. Then we could see the end of our road. Then we could see the sky. Gray and overcast, but sky nonetheless. By evening, you could walk outside and see where you were going. You could see people's faces again. You could see London again. It was over. But the dying wasn't. The days and weeks after the fog lifted were when we truly understood what had happened. The newspapers started reporting the death toll. Hundreds dead, they said at first, then thousands, then more. People who had died during the fog from respiratory failure, heart attacks, choking. People who had died in the days after from complications. Elderly people, babies, people with existing health conditions, but also healthy young people whose lungs had been so damaged by the toxic air that they never recovered. 12,000 people. That's the number they eventually settled on. 12,000 dead from 5 days of fog. More than died in any single bombing raid during the Blitz. More than died in some entire years of the war. And it happened so quietly, so insidiously, that for days no one even realized it was happening. Mrs. Abernathy's little Michael survived, but he had asthma for the rest of his life. His lungs were permanently damaged. Dorothy and I were lucky. We were young and healthy, and though we both had respiratory problems for months afterward, we recovered. But I still remember that feeling of drowning in air. I still remember thinking I was going to die in my own flat, in my own city from something as simple as fog. Except it wasn't fog. It was poison. It was the price of progress without regulation, of profit without thought for consequences, of a society that had accepted pollution as normal and inevitable. The Great Smog changed Britain. It had to. 12,000 people dead in 5 days would change any country. In 1956, Parliament passed the Clean Air Act. It restricted the burning of coal in urban areas, created smokeless zones, mandated the use of cleaner fuels. It was the beginning of environmental legislation in Britain, the first time the government said, "No, we cannot allow this. The air itself cannot be poison." It took years, decades even, but London's air got cleaner. The famous pea-souper fogs disappeared. Children grew up who never saw the kind of air pollution we considered normal. The Thames cleaned up. Birds came back to the city center. But 12,000 people had to die first. 12,000 people had to choke to death in their own homes before anyone acted. I'm 94 years old now, and I've lived through a lot. World War II, the Cold War, the digital revolution. I've seen the world change in ways I never could have imagined when I was a 20-year-old secretary in 1952. But I've never forgotten those 5 days in December. I've never forgotten what it felt like to not be able to breathe, to be trapped in a city that was killing its own people, to watch the world disappear into toxic murk. And when I see news reports about air pollution in Delhi, or Beijing, or Los Angeles, when I hear about climate change and environmental degradation, when I hear politicians saying we can't afford environmental regulations, that we need to prioritize the economy over clean air, I remember. I remember what happens when we decide profit is more important than breathable air. I remember what happens when we accept pollution as the price of progress. I remember what happens when we wait until people are dying before we act. Let me tell you about the moment I knew we would survive. It was Wednesday, December 10th. The fog had lifted the day before, but the air was still gray, still smelled of sulfur. Dorothy and I ventured out properly for the first time, needing to restock our supplies, needing to see the city again, needing to prove to ourselves that the world still existed. We walked to Victoria Park, about a mile from our flat. We needed to see something green, something alive, something that wasn't walls and fog and fear. The park was full of people. Everyone had the same idea. We needed to see the sky, needed to breathe air that didn't burn our lungs, needed to be around other people who had survived. And there was this girl. She couldn't have been more than 6 or 7, and she was running. Just running in circles, arms outstretched like she was flying, laughing. Her mother was sitting on a bench, watching her with this expression of pure relief and joy. She caught my eye and smiled. "She hasn't been able to go outside for 5 days," the mother said. "She's been going mad, cooped up." And I watched this little girl run and laugh and breathe, and I thought, we survived. We survived. And we'll make sure this never happens again. Except we didn't make sure, did we? Not globally. Not really. Right now, millions of people around the world are breathing air as toxic as London's was in 1952. Every year, air pollution kills an estimated 7 million people worldwide. 7 million. Every single year. We learned the lesson in London. We passed laws, cleaned up our air, made our cities livable again. But we exported the problem. We moved our dirty industries to other countries. We sold our coal and our pollution to other cities, other children, other families who are living through their own version of the Great Smog. And we're adding new poisons to the air, carbon dioxide, methane, chemicals that are changing the climate itself, making the air hotter, more unstable, more dangerous in different ways. The Great Smog taught us that air pollution kills, that environmental degradation isn't some abstract future problem, but an immediate, deadly threat. That we have to act before the bodies pile up, not after. Have we learned that lesson? Have we really? I think about those 5 days a lot. More now than I used to, actually. When you're 94, you think about death. It's not morbid. It's just realistic. I've outlived my husband, most of my friends, my sister Dorothy, who died 15 years ago from lung cancer. The doctor said it might have been related to the damage from the Great Smog, all those years ago. 70 years later, and that fog was still killing. But I also think about those days because they taught me something important about human beings. We're resilient. We survive. That girl running in Victoria Park survived. Mrs. Abernathy's little Michael survived. Dorothy and I survived. London survived. But we're also willfully blind. We ignore problems until they kill us. We prioritize short-term convenience over long-term survival. We tell ourselves that pollution is just the price of modern life, that we can't afford to fix it, that it's not really that bad. Until suddenly it is. Until people start dying. Until you can't see your own hands in front of your face. Until the air itself becomes poison. The Great Smog didn't appear out of nowhere. It was building for years, decades. Every coal fire, every factory, every power station was adding to the problem. We just didn't pay attention until we couldn't breathe. What are we not paying attention to now? What's building right now that we're ignoring? What will our grandchildren look back on and say, how could they have let this happen? Couldn't they see? I was interviewed by a journalist a few years ago for the 60th anniversary of the Great Smog. Young man, couldn't have been more than 30. He asked me what I wanted people to know about those 5 days. I thought about it for a long time. I want them to know it was real, I finally said. I want them to know that a modern Western city, one of the greatest cities in the world, killed 12,000 of its own people in 5 days because we were burning too much coal and nobody wanted to do anything about it. But we did do something about it eventually, he said. We passed the Clean Air Act. We cleaned up London. Eventually, I said, after 12,000 people died, after it was too late for them. That's what I want people to know. We always wait until it's too late. He wrote a nice article. I don't know if anyone paid attention. On December 9th, 1952, when the fog finally lifted and I could see the sky again, I made myself a promise. I promised that I would never forget what it felt like to not be able to breathe, that I would never take clean air for granted, that I would never accept pollution as normal or inevitable, or just the way things are. And I promised that if I ever got the chance to tell people what happened, if anyone ever wanted to listen, I would tell them the truth. The truth is this: the Great Smog was preventable. Every single one of those 12,000 deaths was preventable. We knew coal smoke was harmful. We knew the air in London was polluted. We just didn't care enough to do anything about it until people started dying. And even then, even with bodies in the streets and hospitals overflowing, it took 4 more years to pass the Clean Air Act. 4 years of debate and discussion and economic impact studies and lobbying from coal companies and arguments about feasibility and cost. 4 years while people kept breathing polluted air, kept getting sick, kept dying. Because that's how we are. That's how humans are. We know what's happening. We know what we need to do. But we don't do it until we absolutely have to, until the crisis is undeniable, until people are literally dying. I'm telling you this story not just as history. I'm telling you this as a warning. The climate is changing. The air is getting more polluted in many parts of the world. Extreme weather is getting more extreme. Scientists are telling us what's coming, just like they could have told us in 1952 that London's air pollution was dangerous. Are we listening? Or are we waiting for the fog to get so thick we can't see our own hands? Let me take you back one more time to December 1952. It's Saturday night, December 6th, the third night of the fog. Dorothy and I are sitting in our flat, barely able to see each other across the room, both of us coughing, both of us scared. And Dorothy says, "Do you think they'll cancel Christmas?" It was such an absurd question that I almost laughed. Cancel Christmas? How do you cancel Christmas? But I understood what she meant. Christmas was less than 3 weeks away, and at that moment, it seemed impossible that we'd still be alive by then. It seemed impossible that the fog would ever lift, that the sun would ever shine again, that we'd ever breathe clean air again. The fog had only been there for 3 days, and already it felt like forever. Already it felt like this was how the world was now, how it would always be. Dark and choking and hopeless. They won't cancel Christmas, I told her. The fog will lift. We'll survive this. And we'll have Christmas dinner with Mum and Dad, and we'll eat too much. And Dad will fall asleep in his chair, and everything will be normal again. And I was right. We did survive. We did have Christmas dinner. Everything did go back to normal. Except it wasn't really normal, was it? Because 12,000 people didn't have Christmas dinner that year. 12,000 chairs were empty. 12,000 families were grieving. 12,000 lives were cut short because we couldn't be bothered to clean up our air until it was too late. That's the legacy of the Great Smog. Not just the Clean Air Act, not just the lessons learned, but 12,000 empty chairs. 12,000 people who should have lived, who would have lived, if we'd acted sooner. I'm 94 years old and I don't know how much longer I have, but I needed to tell this story. I needed someone to hear it, to understand it, to remember it. Because the Great Smog isn't just history, it's a blueprint, it's a warning, it's a perfect example of what happens when we ignore environmental problems until they kill us. We're doing it again. Right now. With climate change, with air pollution, with environmental degradation. We're watching the fog roll in, and we're telling ourselves it's not that bad. It's probably fine. We'll deal with it later. Later is too late. Later means bodies, later means empty chairs at Christmas dinner. I learned that in December 1952, coughing in my flat in Bethnal Green, unable to see my own sister across the room, wondering if I would survive the night. We survived the Great Smog. London survived. Britain survived. We learned our lesson and cleaned up our air and made sure it would never happen again. But the world didn't learn. The world is still burning coal, still polluting the air, still waiting for the crisis to get bad enough before acting. How bad does it have to get? How many people have to die? How thick does the fog have to be before we can't ignore it anymore? There's a moment I think about sometimes. It was Tuesday, December 9th, when the fog was just starting to lift. I was standing at our window, looking out at the world slowly coming back into focus, and I heard a bird singing. I can't even tell you what kind of bird it was. I'm not a bird person. But I heard it singing, clear and pure, the first natural sound I'd heard in 5 days that wasn't a cough, or a siren, or a cry for help. And I cried. I just stood at that window and cried with relief, because a bird was singing, because the fog was lifting, because we had survived. That's what I want you to understand. That's what I want you to feel. The relief of breathing clean air, of seeing the sky, of hearing a bird sing. The relief of surviving something that should never have happened in the first place. We shouldn't have to survive our own cities. We shouldn't have to be grateful for breathable air. These should be givens, not privileges. But they're not. In many parts of the world, they're not. And if we're not careful, they won't be anywhere. The Great Smog taught me that the air can kill you, that your own city can become a death trap. That environmental disasters don't announce themselves with sirens and warnings. They just roll in quietly, like fog, and by the time you realize what's happening, people are already dying. Don't wait for the fog. Don't wait for the crisis. Don't wait for the bodies. Act now. Demand clean air. Demand environmental protection. Demand that governments and corporations prioritize people over profit, health over convenience, the future over the present. Because I'm 94 years old and I won't be here much longer, but you will be. Your children will be. Your grandchildren will be. What kind of air will they breathe? What kind of world will they inherit? That's up to you. That's up to all of us. I survived the Great Smog of 1952. 12,000 people didn't. Let that number sit with you for a moment. 12,000 people, dead in 5 days. From fog, from air pollution, from something completely preventable. It happened in London, one of the richest, most advanced cities in the world. It happened in 1952, in living memory. It happened because we knew better but didn't do better. It could happen again. It is happening again, in different forms, in different places. Unless we learn. Unless we act. Unless we decide that breathable air is not a luxury but a right. That's my story. That's my warning. That's my hope. I'm Margaret Henderson. I was a Londoner during the Great Smog, and I'm telling you, don't let it happen again. If this story affected you, if it made you think, if it made you realize how precious clean air is, then please share this video. Talk about it. Demand better from your leaders and your communities. Hit that subscribe button if you want to hear more stories from history that matter, that have lessons for us today. Leave a comment telling me about the air quality where you live. Is it clean? Is it polluted? What are you doing about it? And most importantly, act. Don't just watch and forget. Act. Because somewhere out there, right now, someone is breathing toxic air. Somewhere right now, a child is developing asthma because of pollution. Somewhere right now, the fog is rolling in. Don't wait until you can't breathe to care about clean air. The Great Smog killed 12,000 people before we did something about it. How many more have to die before we learn? I'm 94 years old. I've told my story. Now it's your turn to write the ending. Make it better than ours was.